For 3 long years, through blazing summers, falling leaves, and freezing snow, a stray dog sat at the same bus stop, waiting for someone who never came back. But when the truth finally came out, it changed everything. But before we dive in, what time is it where you are right now, and where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to see how far Max's story travels. And if you love true animal stories that will touch your heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss one. In the quiet town of Everwood, where the morning bus was as much a part of the daily rhythm as the church bells, there stood a figure everyone knew, yet no one truly knew. He wasn't human, though he kept his own kind of schedule. He was a medium-sized dust brown dog with a slightly weathered coat and eyes that held an odd mix of softness and resolve. No collar hung from his neck. No tags jingled when he moved. He seemed to belong to no one. And yet, in a strange way, he belonged to everyone. Every morning, as predictably as the sunrise, he appeared at the corner of Maple Street and 7th. By 8:15 sharp, he would be there, sitting in the same worn patch of concrete beside the rusted green bench that served as the town's bus stop. His posture never changed much, head high, ears tilted forward, gaze fixed unflinchingly on the road. It was as if his eyes were magnets pulled toward something, or someone, that was always just out of sight. At first, townsfolk assumed he was like any other stray, lingering for scraps, drifting wherever a kind hand or a sandwich crust might lead him. Some tried to coax him away with food. A steaming sausage roll from the bakery. A leftover chicken drumstick wrapped in a napkin. He would accept these offerings only under one peculiar condition. They had to be placed directly beside the bench, within a paw's reach of his chosen spot. Any attempt to lure him further away, even by a few steps, was met with polite disinterest. He would turn his head slightly, not in fear but in quiet refusal, as if saying, "I can't leave. Not yet." And once he had eaten, he would return to his position, tail tucked neatly around his paws, eyes locked again on that endless stretch of asphalt. Mrs. Larkin, the silver-haired woman who owned the bakery across the street, had perhaps seen the most of him. She'd watch from her shop window as she kneaded dough or dusted cinnamon over fresh pastries. She had seen him in every season, sprawled in the sliver of shade offered by the bench during sweltering summer afternoons, his sides rising and falling with slow patience, framed in the fiery orange of autumn leaves, with a cool wind ruffling the fur along his back, shivering through icy mornings, tiny crystals of frost clinging to his whiskers, yet still unmoving. "He's waiting for someone," Mrs. Larkin often told customers as she poured coffee into paper cups. Her voice carried the certainty of someone who had lived long enough to recognize love when she saw it, even if it was in the eyes of a dog. Children walking to school began calling him Bus Stop Buddy. They'd greet him every morning, some giving a quick scratch behind the ears before darting off as the bus arrived. Teenagers used him as a landmark when giving directions. "Yeah, just past the bus stop where the dog sits." He became more than just a stray. He became part of the town's story. But despite the attention, despite the quiet affection, no one had managed to answer the question that hung in the air like mist over the morning pavement. Who was he waiting for? And why did he never, ever miss a day? No one knew the answer. But the dog did. And he wasn't leaving until the day they returned. In Everwood, stories spread the way autumn leaves blew across Main Street, drifting from porch to porch, shop to shop, picking up details and embellishments along the way. And lately the stories swirling most often were about the brown stray at the bus stop. By now nearly everyone had noticed him. He wasn't just a fixture. He was an unsolved puzzle staring the whole town in the face. And as with most mysteries, theories began to take root. The simplest and perhaps saddest theory came from those who had seen too many pets left behind. "Someone dropped him off and never came back," muttered Mr. Turner, who ran the hardware store. "You know how it is. Folks move away, can't take the dog. Happens all the time." He'd say it with a shake of his head, as though trying to make peace with the cruelty of it. Others leaned toward a darker possibility. They whispered about an accident, a car that never made it to the bus stop. Some believed the dog had seen it happen, that maybe his owner had been taken away in flashing lights, never to return. And now he was stuck here, clinging to the last place they had been together. But there were those who swore they had witnessed something else, a flicker of recognition. These people said the dog's ears would perk, his tail give a hopeful twitch, when certain buses pulled in. But it always ended the same way, The doors hissed open, strangers filed out, and the dog's posture fell back into that quiet, dignified stillness. Children, however, saw the situation differently. Kids have a way of ignoring the harsh edges of the world, and to them the stray was something magical, a secret friend they could visit each day. They nicknamed him Bus Stop Buddy, a title that quickly stuck. On warm mornings they would crouch beside him, whispering stories into his floppy ears as if he could understand every word. On colder days they left him small offerings, a plastic bowl filled with fresh water, bits of toast, even worn blankets they'd begged from their parents. But the blankets always ended up in the same state, pushed aside or dragged just far enough away that his view of the road was unobstructed. It wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate, as if nothing, not even comfort, should block his sight line. There was a nobility to the way he sat, head high, shoulders square, unmoving except for the slow, rhythmic blink of his eyes. It wasn't the fidgety restlessness of a stray hoping for handouts. It was something quieter, something patient, something loyal in a way that made your chest ache if you thought about it too long. The bus stop was no longer just a bus stop. It was a stage where an untold story played out every single day. And whether they admitted it or not, the people of Everwood were hooked. The mystery of Bus Stop Buddy had become a thread that tied them all together, a shared curiosity, tinged with a sadness they couldn't quite name. Yet, for all their theories and whispers, no one dared try to take him away. It felt wrong somehow, as if removing him would tear the last page from a book before the ending could be read. And deep down maybe they all knew, whatever he was waiting for, it wasn't over yet. The air that morning was the kind that stung your lungs when you breathed. A pale sun hung low over Everwood, casting long shadows across the frozen pavement. Officer Mark Daniels was on his usual patrol route, his breath puffing in small clouds as he walked the quiet streets. When he turned onto Maple Street, his boots crunching against the salt scattered over the sidewalk, he saw him, the same brown dog he'd noticed a dozen times before. But today something about the scene felt different. Maybe it was the frost dusting the dog's whiskers, or the way his paws shifted slightly on the cold ground, trying to avoid the chill seeping in from the concrete. Daniel slowed his pace. He wasn't in a rush, and truth be told, he'd always felt a tug in his chest when he saw the animal sitting there so still, as though frozen in more than just the January cold. He stopped a few feet away and crouched down so he wouldn't seem threatening. "Hey there, buddy." His voice was warm, almost conversational, the way you'd talk to an old friend you hadn't seen in a while. The dog's ears twitched, and for the briefest moment, his tail gave a slow wag. But almost instantly, his focus snapped back to something behind Daniels, the low, distant rumble of an approaching bus. Daniels turned his head just as the vehicle rounded the bend. The dog rose slightly from his haunches, his body leaning forward, eyes narrowing in sharp concentration. In that moment, Daniels saw it, the unmistakable flicker of hope. It was in the tilt of his ears, the way his breathing quickened ever so slightly. This wasn't a stray scoping out a meal. This was someone awaiting. The bus groaned to a stop, brakes hissing in the cold air. The doors swung open with a metallic clunk. One by one, people stepped down. A young man in a puffy coat, a woman balancing a paper cup of coffee, an older man with a battered briefcase. The dog's eyes scanned each face with laser precision. Then, when the last passenger stepped onto the icy sidewalk and the driver closed the doors, Daniel saw it happen. The spark faded. The dog's body relaxed, his head dipped slightly, and the quiet weight of disappointment seemed to settle over him like another layer of frost. Daniel stayed there for a moment, watching. "You're not just waiting, are you?" he murmured under his breath. "You're looking." The bus pulled away, spewing a cloud of exhaust that drifted through the morning air. The dog sat back down, paws tucked neatly beneath him, gaze fixed once again on the empty road ahead. Daniel straightened, his breath catching in the cold, but his mind already turning. This wasn't a random habit. This wasn't coincidence. Whoever, or whatever, the dog was waiting for, it was tied to that bus. And Daniels knew he couldn't just walk away anymore. Something told him that uncovering the truth might change more than just the dog's life. The next morning, Officer Daniels woke with the image of the brown dog still lingering in his mind. It had gnawed at him through the night, that flicker of hope in the dog's eyes, the way it vanished like a candle snuffed out. By mid-morning, after finishing his patrol, Daniels decided he couldn't leave it alone. If the dog was waiting for someone, maybe someone in town knew who it was. And if they didn't, well, he'd find out. He started with the bakery. Mrs. Larkin had been watching that corner longer than anyone. Seen him for years, she said, brushing flour from her hands. Always the same spot. Used to come with a young man. Tall, dark hair, always wore this, oh, what was it? A green jacket. Faded like it had been through a few winters. Then one day the man stopped coming, but the dog stayed. That was something. Daniels thanked her and moved on, stopping at the barber shop, the post office, even the little diner on Main Street. Most people had seen the dog, but their recollections blurred. Different descriptions, vague timelines. It wasn't until he reached the Everwood Public Library that he got more. The building smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish, and in the corner, near a stack of returned books, sat Mr. Callahan, the oldest resident in town. His hands trembled slightly as he turned pages, but his mind, Daniels knew, was sharp as ever. Yes, Callahan said when asked, his eyes narrowing with thought. I remember him. That dog used to follow a young fella everywhere. Tall, lean, quiet. Wore a green jacket most days. Came here sometimes to read the paper. And every morning they'd walk together to the bus stop. Daniels leaned forward. Do you know what happened to him? Callahan sighed, shaking his head. Last I saw, he was getting on the bus. Must have been 3 years ago now. Haven't seen him since. But the dog, well, you know the rest. 3 years. The number sat heavily in Daniel's mind. He thanked Callahan and wandered deeper into the library, making his way toward the local archives. The musty smell grew stronger, the silence thicker. Rows of bound newspapers lined the shelves like time capsules, each holding the town's history in brittle pages. It didn't take long to find the edition from around that time. Flipping carefully, Daniel's eyes caught on a grainy black and white photo. There he was, tall, young, stepping onto the bus with one foot on the metal step, hand gripping the rail. Even in the faded image, Daniels could make out the green jacket. Above the photo, the headline read, "Local soldier deployed overseas." Daniels stared at the caption beneath, reading the name. Luke Matthews, age 24, set to begin his first overseas tour. The article was short, just a few paragraphs about his service and the community's pride. But what struck Daniels most was what wasn't there. No follow-up article. No welcome home piece. Just silence after that day. He sat back, the weight of realization pressing down on him. The soldier never returned to Everwood. But why? Where had the story ended for Luke Matthews? And why had no one told the dog? Daniels closed the newspaper slowly, a knot tightening in his chest. He had the first real clue. But something told him the truth behind it would be heavier than he was ready for. Daniels didn't stop at the headline. The truth was too close now, too heavy to leave unanswered. Over the next few days, he pieced together Luke Matthews' story through old records, a few military contacts, and reluctant memories from townsfolk who still remembered the young man with the faded green jacket. Luke had been 24 when he boarded that bus for the last time. The son of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, he'd grown up in Everwood, the kind of small-town boy who fixed neighbors' fences without being asked and mowed lawns for widows in the summer. Quiet but strong. Always reliable. And then there was the dog. His name, Daniels learned, was Max. A scrappy shepherd mix Luke had rescued as a pup from the side of a county road. Someone had dumped a litter there in the middle of a storm, and Luke had taken the smallest one home, tucking the shivering bundle inside his jacket. From that night on, Max followed him everywhere. The two were inseparable. People remembered seeing Luke jogging down Maple Street with Max trotting a perfect half-step behind, or sitting together in the park, Luke reading a book while Max rested his head on his knee. But the image that stuck in everyone's mind was the morning routine. Luke walking to the bus stop, Max at his side, tail wagging slow and steady. It wasn't just habit, it was ritual. Luke would crouch beside Max, rub the spot behind his ears, and say the same thing every time, "Hold the fort, buddy. I'll be back." Then he'd board the bus and Max would stay put, watching until it turned the corner and disappeared. Only then would he trot back home. That routine continued even when Luke enlisted. At first he was stationed nearby, so the mornings stayed the same. But the day Luke left for overseas deployment, something in Max must have felt the change. Witnesses remembered how, that morning, the dog sat straighter, eyes fixed harder on Luke than usual. And when Luke stepped onto the bus, Max didn't follow him home. He stayed there, long after the bus had gone, long after the street had emptied. The next part of the story was the one Daniels wished he hadn't uncovered. 8 months into Luke's deployment, his unit was caught in an ambush. Luke was killed in action. The official report was clinical, stripped of all warmth, but to the people of Everwood, it was a gut punch. A memorial service was held, flags lowered. The Matthews family, overcome with grief, left town soon after to be closer to relatives. No one thought about what Max understood or didn't understand. No one thought about telling him that Luke wouldn't be coming home. They assumed he'd adjust as dogs do. But Max didn't adjust. The morning after the memorial, he was there at the bus stop, sitting on that same patch of concrete, waiting, watching, hoping. And when Luke didn't return, he came back the next day, and the next, and the next, for 3 long years. Daniels closed his notebook, the weight of the truth pressing down on him like winter snow. This wasn't just a stray. This was a soldier's best friend, still keeping watch long after his post should have ended. Once Officer Daniels pieced together the truth about Max, he couldn't keep it to himself. In a town like Everwood, secrets rarely stayed hidden, and this one carried a weight that seemed to press on everyone who heard it. The story spread quietly at first, from Mrs. Larkin at the bakery to the postman, from the librarian to the clerk at the gas station. Soon everyone knew, the brown stray at the bus stop wasn't just any dog. He was Max, Luke Matthews' loyal companion, still waiting for his best friend to come home. The change in how the town saw him was immediate. Max wasn't a stray anymore. He was a soldier's dog, a symbol of loyalty so pure it made people's throats tighten when they spoke about him. And with that recognition came action. The bus stop became a small shrine of sorts. Someone set up a sturdy wooden shelter, painted green like Luke's jacket. Others brought blankets, making sure they were placed just far enough away that Max's view of the road stayed unobstructed. Mrs. Larkin delivered warm bread rolls in the mornings, and schoolchildren stopped by with treats before class. The police station kept a water bowl filled at all times. And yet, none of it changed Max's routine. Every morning, as the frost began to melt or the dew settled on the grass, Max would take his position by the bench at precisely 8:15. His eyes locked on the bend in the road where the bus first appeared, and nothing, not the chatter of passers-by, not the rustle of leaves, not even the tempting scent of breakfast from the bakery, could break his focus. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Then one chilly October morning the pattern shifted. Daniels was parked across the street, sipping coffee when he saw the bus pull in. The usual trickle of passengers began to step down. A student with earbuds, a man in a suit, a mother with a stroller, and then a woman. She was in her late 20s, hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing a thick coat that still looked too light for the season. As she stepped off the bus, her eyes swept over the street, and then stopped. She froze. Her hand flew to her mouth. Max. The dog's ears shot up. His head tilted in disbelief for half a heartbeat. Then, as if something inside him had burst free, Max leapt from his spot. His tail became a blur, his paws scraping against the concrete as he bounded toward her. The sound he made wasn't a bark, it was a whine, high and urgent, layered with years of longing. He pressed against her legs, pawing, circling, pressing again as if to make sure she was real. The woman dropped to her knees on the cold pavement. "Oh Max, it's me. It's Sarah, Luke's sister." Her voice cracked, tears spilling freely. Max licked her face with frantic devotion, whining between breaths, his entire body writhing with joy and relief. Passers-by stopped, some covering their mouths, others wiping at their eyes. Daniel stepped closer but didn't interfere. This was a reunion years in the making, the end of a vigil and the beginning of something new. And in that moment, everyone watching knew, Max's wait was finally over. The air that October morning carried the first bite of winter, but Max didn't seem to notice. After 3 years of waiting, the warmth he'd searched for was finally here, in the form of Sarah Matthews, Luke's sister. The townspeople watched as she led him away from the bus stop, her hand resting on his back, his head brushing against her side with every step. It was as if Max feared that if he let even a sliver of space open between them, she might disappear again. Sarah didn't own a house in Everwood anymore. She'd moved to the city after Luke's passing, but she had come to visit his grave and settle some of her late parents' affairs. Her plan had been to return in a week, but the moment she felt Max's heartbeat against hers, her plans changed. "He's coming home with me," she told Officer Daniels when they reached the curb. Her voice was firm, but her eyes were glassy. Daniel simply nodded, his lips curving into a rare, genuine smile. That afternoon, Sarah took Max to a vet in town. He was thinner than he should have been, his fur coarse from the years outside, but his spirit was unbroken. With a warm bed, regular meals, and gentle hands, the old sparkle in his eyes began to return. But this time, it wasn't hope for someone who might come back. It was gratitude for someone who had. In the weeks that followed, Max adjusted to his new life. Sarah's small apartment was a far cry from the open streets of Everwood, but he quickly found favorite spots. A patch of sunlight by the living room window, a rug beside her bed where he'd curl up at night. And yet, every so often, Sarah noticed something. Around 8:15 in the morning, Max would wander to the door and look out toward the street, as if listening for something only he could hear. So once a month, Sarah brought him back to Everwood. They'd walk the familiar route down Maple Street, stop at the old green bench, and sit together in quiet remembrance. Sometimes she'd talk to him softly about Luke, about the way he laughed, the way he always kept a peppermint in his jacket pocket for after lunch. Other times they'd just sit in silence, watching buses come and go, neither expecting anything but both honoring the ritual. Word of Max's story traveled far beyond Maple Street. A local reporter wrote about him, and soon his tale spread across social media. Photos of the brown dog who waited, the soldier who never returned, and the sister who came instead. Messages poured in from strangers around the world, many sharing their own stories of loyal animals who had refused to give up. Max's vigil had ended, but what he represented lived on. He became more than a dog from a small town. He became a symbol of a love that refuses to forget, even when the world has moved on. And so, if you're watching this, take a moment to think about the Max in your own life. The loyal friend, the silent companion, the one who waits for you without question. Somewhere out there, another Max is still sitting on a bench, eyes fixed on the horizon, holding on to hope. If Max's story touched your heart, subscribe and share it. Let his loyalty remind us all that sometimes, love is simply never leaving. Max's watch is over, but his story will live on in the hearts of everyone who hears it. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of loyalty and love. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a pet who waited for you or showed their love in an unforgettable way? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more true animal hero stories that will warm your heart and maybe even bring a tear to your eye.